I'm Danny Sriskandarajah. I'm Secretary General of Civicus, which is a global civil society alliance.
What did you find most inspiring about today?
Well, I think it's so great that people who care about the world and about sustainable development can come together and almost plot for the future. There's so much we have to do to make the world more just and sustainable, and what we need is more good, energized, inspired people to come together and change the course of history, because it's so urgent that we do that, and we need civil society leaders, people who work as volunteers, people who are experts on these issues to come together and guide us through the next few years.
If I was to ask your friends and family about what you do, what would they tell me?
I work to support civil society, and I think my job is to help others who help others, because we're more than ever before, we need communities and people to come together to help each other, to stand up for rights, to speak up for the marginalized, to protect victims. And that's why we need civil society, and an organization like Civicus tries to make their lives much better.
If you were to stop a passerby and convince them about the importance of supporting overseas development, how would you convince them?
We are in it together. Increasingly the problems in one part of the world are being felt in another part of the world. And so we might have national boundaries, but we need to have a shared sense of humanity. And yes, we need to help at home, but we also need to help abroad. And as some of these challenges become more universal, we need to have a much more sophisticated view about standing together in solidarity and helping each other.
Public opinion polls suggest that there is significant lack of trust in NGOs. What do you think should be done to regain this trust?
I think there's only one way forward for NGOs, and that's to connect with the communities that they serve. If an NGO treats its donors as ATMs just to withdraw cash from, people aren't going to put up with that. If NGOs treat people as passive and stupid, people aren't going to put up with that. What we need is a much more sophisticated, engaged relationship with a supporter base, almost to go back to the future, because many of these wonderful NGOs were built as community organizations that were grounded in faith groups or in trades unions or in secular groups, and we need to go back to restoring some of that vitality and connective tissue.
Art advocacy was one of the topics discussed today, and do you think in an increasingly digitalized world that art is becoming more important to fight against social justice issues?
We need to deploy every means we can to promote social justice and sustainable development. And I think art is one of those things that's underused in trying to communicate and activate people. A few years ago we did this thing where we brought some artists together and copied something that happened in France in 1968. There was something called the 72-hour smash, where a bunch of activist artists came together for 72 hours and they couldn't sleep and they had to make art. And we tried to do that in Johannesburg, where our head office is. And it was amazing, because these were amazing creative people who cared as much about what was going on around them and cared as much about social justice than any of us sort of professional NGO workers. And just mashing those people together and that creative energy was just amazing. I wish we could do more of that more often.
And what role do you think young people play in sustainable development?
Well, I think we have to look towards young people for taking some of the moral leadership on this issue. I had the honour of meeting Mary Robinson this morning, who's talking a lot more about intergenerational justice. She says the interests of those young people today and people who are not yet born are not being taken into account when we burn our planet and pillage the resources of this planet. And so we almost need, I think, a new moral vision for sustainable development that's owned by young people, and following from that vision is a plan of action about how we're going to get there. I don't get tired of people talking about the leaders of tomorrow. We need young people to be the leaders of today.
That's brilliant. Thank you.